Since the invention of the wheel and the first engine, man has always had a fascination with the automobile. Even in those early days, those young speed merchants used to push them to the limit. This is the story about some of the legendary figures in stock car racing. In those early days, it was a rough and tumble sport, not for the weak of heart. Those pioneers bumped their way around dirt tracks across the South. As the sport began to grow, though, a few select men turned a Saturday night hobby into a full-time profession. People like Curtis Turner, Lee Petty, Joe Weatherly, Marshall Teague, to name just a few. And of course, then there were others who also liked to try to make a living with their automobile. Not exactly within the letter of the law. Junior Johnson.
How old were you when you started driving?
I really started playing around with cars when I was about 13 years old and driving them on the highway and going on at 14. I was fully qualified to, do whatever I need to do on the highway at that point in time. 15, I didn't fear anything, and I could do anything I wanted to with a car.
When did you start making a living with a car? I'm not talking about a race car, but making a living with it.
About 15. About 15. I was, I'd haul moonshine a lot at night, go to school next day.
Did you brag to your schoolmates? Well, I went to Winston last night with a...
No, I was scared to. It's something that you kind of kept to yourself, and if you bragged about it, wasn't long you was put away somewhere or another for, you get caught at it and stuff. And the real good bootleggers kept their mouths shut, and that's what I tried to be. And I had to go to school, and I couldn't, couldn't let everybody know what I was doing at night, and I was really kind of scared too, so I did it a lot while I went to school.
Did you, when you hauled moonshine, when you had that load on it, did you go about that the same way that you later drove a race car? When you fired that car, did you just run wide open to wherever you were going, or did you take it easy, kind of cautious?
Well, there was two ways you could do it. Back then, there weren't any traffic on the highway, so you didn't have any problems. The only thing that you'd ever run across is maybe occasionally you'd find somebody's cows had got out or something, and they'd be staggering around in the road. You might hit one of them or something, but mostly a deer or something is the only thing you ever hit at night when you was running down the road. And there was a sort of a feeling that if you was going full bore all the time, and the revenue officers and the highway patrols and stuff was sitting on the side of the road and you went by, you was away before they could ever get going good. You done got out plumb away from them. And that's the way a lot of the bootleggers believed, and that's the way they ran at night. I basically run somewhere 120, 30 mile an hour all the time, everywhere I went.
And now this was not on interstate highways, this was on two-lane and sometimes dirt roads.
A lot. Once you learned the roads and learned where you was going, and you knew all the curves and the bankings of the curves and the ins and outs of the curves, you just went wide open about all the time, everywhere you went. And I don't know a bootlegger that ran over anybody, run into anybody at night, because there just wasn't anybody out there. Everybody went to bed at 6 or 7 o'clock, and you had the roads by yourself,
That's the bootleggers really and truly started souping up cars and making them faster just so that they could
get away from the revenue.
Get away from the revenue.
Yeah. And occasionally they would catch a bootlegger's car, then the revenues would use it to chase the bootleggers. Then immediately you had to go back and do something else to your car to be able to outrun that car. And it just compounded itself and kept roller coasting on and on and on. And it wasn't long till the bootlegging cars was, you know, the top breed in fast cars and stuff. I know I've had faster bootlegging cars than I ever had race cars. You know.
Well, okay, you were driving on the highway when you was 15 or 16. When did you run your first race against other guys in a racetrack or in that kind of environment?
I was plowing corn back here for my dad, plowing a mule, and my brother, they had a racetrack in 47 at Wilkesboro, and they was having a little Wilkes County race intermixed with the race they had there to, you know, because it was only something like a 100-mile race, and they needed entertainment to entertain the people until the main event would come up. And they wanted to run a little bootlegger race with the whiskey cars. And my brother had a car, and he wanted me to come up there and drive it for him. So he came down from Wilkesboro and got me out of the field. And I just tied my mule to a fence post and walked off and left him and went with him to run in that little bootlegger race that they had.
You didn't have roll bars or anything like that in the cars, did you?
Nothing.
Did you have a seat belt?
Some of the guys took an old rope or something and tied themselves in it, but I didn't. I was, you know, pretty muscular at that time, so I could hang in there, you know.
You just hung on the steering wheel, right?
Right, true. And I was used to that kind of situation anyway, because on the highway you wouldn't buckle in or nothing. You just manhandled the car, and you basically was strong enough to hang on to the steering wheel and hold yourself on the steering wheel.
You liked that first race? You liked that competition?
Well, I didn't think nothing about it much. The thrill of the thing thrill of racing never was a big factor with me because I was used to the high speeds prior to ever going to a racetrack. And I enjoyed competing against the individual, but not the thrill of driving a race car. Wasn't anything exciting to me because I'd already had that excitement on the highways.
So when the race was over, did you come back and finish plowing the field?
Came back, had a pair of old Brogan shoes on. I had pulled them off. I was plowing barefooted, and I put them on to go up there, and I come back, pulled my shoes off, hitched my mule up, and went back to plowing.
When did you decide that you might want to... When did you decide that you might want to make a living with cars? I mean, driving race cars.
Really not until about 1960. I fooled with it a little bit. Like I would go drive a race, and then I might not drive a race for another month. It just did not interest me all that much. I had other things I wanted to do, and until about 1960, I was trying to get into some other things other than whiskey, because that was what I'd been in all the time. And that's about the time that I said, well, racing might be what I need to take a look at. And then's when I kind of put a full effort in 1960, and I did it for 5 years, and then I just quit driving and started owning cars. But I'd basically pretty much made up my mind I wasn't going to put my whole life into driving a race car, because that just wasn't what I was interested in doing.
Now, while Johnson was making a decision that he would not be a driver for the rest of his life, another man had already made another decision, one that would affect the world of racing. For Bill France Sr., Big Bill, as he was known among the racing folks for more than 4 decades, the creation of NASCAR as a sanctioning body for stock car racing became a lifelong endeavor. His son, Bill France Jr., is the current president of NASCAR, and he remembers those early days.
he was truly a one-man band. People liked him. He could talk and shoot the breeze with a fellow ran a service station, and just as easy as the next breath be talking to the chairman of the board of some major company someplace. And he liked people. He liked being around people. And basically people liked him. And if he said he would do something, he always did it. Worked hard, had a lot of imagination, loved the telephone. Probably would talk on the telephone as much as anybody I've ever met. And that would be 7 days a week. He'd call somebody to about this or about that or a deal or just to say hello. It was described by a friend of ours here in Daytona that in a sense, he created a sport. And a lot of people manage sports or build something, but he created one.
See, Bill France Sr. would help everybody. I don't care who. He was a father. When you went broke, you went to see him. You know, you call him Dad. That's what I call him, Dad.
How many times did you go see him?
I should have moved in.
You was there every week, right?
Well, the biggest joke of all was I felt sorry for, I thought Bill France Sr. was poor. I really did. He invited me over to his house. And I saw his house.
He was poor.
Well, because he was from Winston-Salem, all that place. I never saw, he's always, you see all these folks, they act poor. They have these real long bib uniforms on, and spitting tobacco and all this stuff, And I thought they lived in one of these little houses, Because in my whole life, I never saw an outhouse, an outside house, because I'm from Chicago, see? And I said, these people must be poor down here or something, see? That's true.
So you went to see France?
Yeah, so I went to see France. He invited me over to his house. I walked in his house, he had a book where you have to sign in. And I looked at his house, I says, my God, Bill, you better pray that all the rest of the drivers don't see this house, because they're going to say, this is where the point fund went.
To build his house.
Yeah, right. Oh, he loved it. He loved it. He did. He loved it. But the biggest irony of all when I came south is, in Chicago, I was bad on books, school. I didn't know my history, because I hated history. I threw the books out the window, to be frank with you. I hated history. Absolutely hated it. Because I thought that was just a waste, what no one had in the past. So I come south, and I hear this, you're a Yankee. I mean, bad. In 55 was real bad. Yankee, they call us. And I asked France Sr., I said, why do these people call me Yankee? And they want to kill me, more or less, He says, Tom, they don't like northern people. And he's explain the war to me, the Civil War, which I never heard of.
You had never heard of Civil War?
Never heard of Civil War, never.
Okay.
Honest to God, true. So France decided, he put down on the hood, a converted Yankee with a light bulb. And he says, I see the light. And I pinned a rebel flag on the car. See? And all the races I went to, I said, I'm no Yankee, I'm a Southern Wop, because I'm Italian, see? And I more or less got affiliated with the people down south, and they took a liking to me because I said, I'm not a Yankee. You ain't gonna call me a converted Yankee or a damn Yankee or nothing. I'm not a Yankee, I'm a Southern Wop.
Tom Pistone was one of the early Northerners to first embrace that fledgling NASCAR circuit that Bill France had founded. Of course, nowadays, the circuit has drivers from all over the country, but still in the 60s, the majority of the drivers were from the heartland of the South, the Carolinas, Virginia, Georgia, Alabama. One of the very best during that time was Ned Jarrett. And as he tried to break into big-time stock car racing, he found out that sometimes you had to be as innovative off the track as you were on the track.
I had won the Sportsman Championship in '57 and '58 and really thought that car owners in what is now Winston Cup would come knocking on my door and want me to drive their race car.
Didn't happen.
Didn't happen. So I had to go out and start looking for something to drive. And I found a '57 Chevrolet convertible in Kannapolis, North Carolina. '57 Chevrolets were good race cars. This particular one was not too good, though. And it would run fast, but it wouldn't run long. It was always breaking down, and I'd ran it for 3 or 4 months and didn't finish many races, and I knew that I was not doing my career any good because people would just say, well, he can drive those '37 Ford Coupes that won him the national championships, but now he gets in one of these big cars, maybe he can't drive those so good. And I still felt that I could drive those cars. And I was at Greenville, South Carolina on a Friday night in August. and in that Chevrolet, and sure enough, we went towards the front, but it broke. And I had my brother and a friend, John Tate, was with me at that race, and it was about 100 miles back home. And I told him driving home that night about midnight, I said, I'm going to make a change in my career. I can drive a race car, and I'm going to prove to the world that I can. There was a 57 Ford for sale in my hometown that Junior Johnson was driving. I knew the car because I went there, Bud Allman kept it up, and I'd go down to the garage every day. Junior was winning races in the car, and I knew that I felt that I could. And they wanted to sell it because they were building Junior a new Dodge to run at Darlington in the Southern 500. And so I went, I told my brother and friend, I said, I'm going to buy that car tomorrow. And they knew I didn't have any money, so they said, well, what are you going to buy it with? I said, well, that's back when the bank stayed open until noon on Saturday. I said, I'll wait till the bank closes, and I'll give them the check. And there was a race at Myrtle Beach, South Carolina on Saturday night, and it paid $950 to win. And there was one at the old Charlotte, North Carolina Fairgrounds on Sunday afternoon, and it also paid $950 to win. Well, you add that up, that's $1,900. I said, I can scrape up that other $100 before the bank opens on Monday morning.
Now you're going to win both races?
Win both races.
And borrow $100?
Well, I'd scrape it up somewhere. Now, I might have had the $100, I don't know. But I knew that I could cover, no doubt in my mind, I could cover that check on Monday morning. Absolutely no doubt. And I got so excited, I couldn't sleep. I got home about 3 or 4 o'clock, couldn't sleep the rest of the night. Got up next morning early, went down there and bargained for the car. And, of course, I told them I'd have to think about it while all I was doing was waiting for the bank to close. And so when the bank closed, I rushed back down with that check. I said, I've decided I'll buy this car. Because I knew they had their bank account in the same bank I had mine in, you see. And I had bargained for it. I got the crew chief to go with me that weekend. $2,000 all they wanted for the car. Got the crew chief to go with me. Didn't have any tow equipment, no pit equipment or nothing. Got the tow rig and all the pit equipment, everything I needed to go racing that weekend for the $2,000. And we took off to Myrtle Beach and got there late. Didn't get to qualify, but qualified 8th. I mean, didn't get to practice. Qualified 8th. And I got used to the car and found myself up there battling for the lead. And it was the hardest race, Benny, that I ever ran in my life with Bob Welborn. I mean, there were some horses in that field, like Lee Petty and Buck Baker and Junior Johnson and Glenn Wood, and I mean, you can just name them on and on. I mean, there were some tough customers in that field. Joe Weatherly and Curtis Turner, but that was a good race car. And Bob Welborn and I, the last 30 or 40 laps, we were battling back and forth. He'd lead one lap and I'd lead the next one, and we might change the lead twice on each lap. And finally, I happened to be in the lead coming off of turn 4, as we were coming down to get the white flag, and I looked in my rearview mirror, and Bob Welborn was headed to the pits. He broke a wheel down, and I was home free. So I went on to win that race.
Now, wait a minute. Now, wait a minute. I've always said that a race car driver does not think about the money while the race is going on. All he thinks about is the race. Now, this race in Myrtle Beach, did money enter your mind?
Yeah, money entered my mind. I had to win. I had no choice. I had to win. There was
let's go to the next.
No doubt about it. And you remember how they used to do the steering wheels to build them up? You know, the steering wheels today, they dip them in that, they're built up with that rubber fine material. Well, the way we did them back then to build them up so you get a better grip on it and sort of a soft grip as well, you took foam rubber and wrapped around the steering wheel, and then you took electrician's tape to hold the foam rubber on there. Well, the only problem was the guy who did, they had just done that steering wheel that way, and that was another influence for me to buy the car. And they had just wrapped that wheel, but he had wrapped the tape backwards, and I didn't know it till the race started. And every time I saw the wheel cutting to the left, my hand was running against the raw edge of that electrician's tape, literally tore the meat off of my bone. I still believe today that I could see the bone at the end of that race in my hand. Because you know how rough those dirt tracks would get, and it just tore my hand up. In fact, they had to put a tourniquet on it after the end of the race to stop the blood flow in Victory Lane. I probably would have bled to death. I mean, it was bleeding profusely. And so anyway, they took me to the hospital after the little Victory Lane ceremonies, and they bandaged this thing up, and we went on to Charlotte. And it's too late to sleep. We had a lot of work to do on the car anyway. And so I just handed them parts and did errands, and because I was a physical wreck. Next day, the race started, and I was running along. The old car was running good, and I was running along in 4th place. But fortunately for me, I wouldn't have been able to finish because I was a physical wreck. But Junior Johnson was driving a car for Glenn Wood, and the engine blew on it. And the caution came out, and I saw Junior standing over in the pits, and I wheeled in and asked if he would drive the rest of the way, and he did. And the end result was he went on to win the race. I got the credit for it because I started the car and had the $1,900. And
well, wait a minute, did you pay Junior anything?
Well, he wouldn't take anything.
Really?
No, he wouldn't. The story had pretty well gotten around in the racing circles over that weekend what the deal was, and he wouldn't take anything.
But you'd bounce a check.
Yeah, if I didn't win those 2 races and get that 1,900, and so he wouldn't take anything. But I went on to win 3 races out of 5 with that car the rest of the year, and I finally got him to take $100. That's what launched me into Winston Cup racing. That's the truth. Kids don't do that.
He's told me that. Of course, I didn't know nothing about the check not being any good when he wrote it, but I think that was Paul Spaulding's car out of Syracuse, New York. It was later painted blue and white, and it was number 11. And we had bought that car off from Ford Motor Company because they just withdrew from racing. And that was one of Farball Roberts' old car. We bought it from Holman Moody. And later on, we sold it to Ned Jarrett. I think on Sunday, I forget now what happened to Ned. Anyway, I wound up driving the car, and on the Sunday, I think I won the race for him. He either got sick or had the flu or something or other, but I know I wound up in the car before it was over. That went on a lot in racing, though. People always bargained for something they couldn't pay for.
Oh, probably still works that way, too.
Not with me. You pay for it, and then we bargain.
While the drivers were finding ways to make that breakthrough into NASCAR Winston Cup racing, others were just as innovative, and probably one of the most creative mechanics of all time was Smokey Yunick, who still operates his garage in Daytona Beach. He and everybody else call it the best damn garage in town. And as you wander through his rambling complex, the history of racing really comes alive. Engines that were dating back to the 50s and still run today in the 90s. Racing memorabilia that would make any collector's heart pound. Smokey Yunick, he's a unique individual.
Where are you from originally?
Well, hard to say. Tennessee wouldn't be a bad place. In fact, I got a birth certificate that said I was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I paid $10 for it to get into cadets.
You learned to fudge early on, didn't you?
No, I worked for a guy that invented the autogyro, a guy named Pitcairn. And he took a liking to me, and he asked me to, you know, I wanted to fly. And the war started, or getting ready to get started. So I went down to getting the cadets at his suggestion, and first thing they wanted was a birth certificate. Well, I didn't have one. And matter of fact, they didn't know what my real name was. So old Pitcairn was a pretty sharp old guy, so he made a deal with a priest in Philadelphia. And I rode on down there with a motorcycle, and I heard my name was Henry, Howard, or Gregory. And it was spelled 2 or 3 different ways, the last name, so I just picked Henry and spelled it Y-U-N-I-C-K, give the guy $10, he gave me a birth certificate, and I went into cadet. Put first born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on it.
20 years ago, there was a tremendous amount of innovation going on.
A lot of it.
Who was the best?
Smokey?
Smokey was the best innovator.
Yep, best innovator.
All right, there's always been the story that they tried to check your fuel cell one time in Atlanta. Or maybe it was at Daytona. And you took the gas tank out of the car, and something was said that irritated you a little bit, and you got in the car and drove back to the shop. Is that true?
Yeah, that part of the story's true, but there's a hell of a lot of it ain't. In the first place, there wasn't no rule about the size of the fuel line.
Yeah.
Fuel line I had held 6 gallons. But the real truth is the tank was back in the car, and I did put approximately 5 gallons of gas in it. I had a long rope on the front of it, was going to let them tow it at first, and I left the rope on it about that big around, cranked that son of a bitch up, and drove it out of the garage back home. I could have drove it without the gas tank, but I didn't. It had the tank in it and the fuel. I could have drove the son of a bitch to Jacksonville with what I had in it.
Smokey Yunick was acknowledged as one of the best rule benders in the business, but certainly he wasn't the only one. There are stories upon stories of mechanics who kind of stretched the rules as best they could. Along with Smokey, one of the very best was Ray Fox, who is now a Winston Cup inspector. And Benny Parsons spent some time with Ray Fox talking about those old days and about David Pearson and how Fox helped David get the shot he needed in Winston Cup racing.
When did you start in the racing business?
I started in the racing business with Herb Thomas back in 1955. Herb had asked me to go with him. He needed a mechanic to go with him, so I started with Herb building his engines and helping taking care of the car, and that's when I started. And Kiekefer was running in them days with the Chrysler 300s, and Herb and I was the only one to give him any trouble at all. And so he hired the two of us. So we worked with him for a while. Herb got mad and quit, and so Herb and I went back together again. And
What kind of car was this that Herb had then?
a Chevrolet.
55 Chevrolet?
Yes. Yeah.
What's the best trick you ever got away with?
The best trick I ever got away with, I had a real light car one time, and it really had me worried. My son Raymond was working with me then. So like tractors, I put water in the tires to get it through inspection. As you brought it to the track, you know, you weighed it and done the whole ball of wax. And I forgot to tell my son, I'd done this at night, and I forgot to tell him that I had the water in the tires. So when he came to the racetrack to take the tires off to put on the racing tires, it fell on his toes, about broke his foot. They were very heavy.
Well, tire would weigh 70 or 80 pounds with water in it, I guess.
Yeah.
So did you get away with the
Yes,
300 pounds?
we sure did.
Wow.
Awful thing to say, isn't it?
And here you are.
But that was part of racing back then. I only done it one time.
How come did somebody tell on you, or did you get...
No, we got away with it.
You had a guilty conscience?
Yes. Yeah, still haunts me. Still haunts me today.
Right. Yeah. So, how did you get hooked up with David Pearson back in the early 60s?
Well, I can't think of his name to save my life. He just passed away not too long ago. He was working for Firestone at the time. Darrell Darrington was supposed to drive the car. And I came from here up to Charlotte, and Darrell said he couldn't drive the car because Firestone wouldn't let him because of their insurance. So Norris Friel suggested that I call David Pearson, who then was home in Spartanburg, and ask him if he'd come down and try the car out. And so David came down, tried the car out for a couple of days, sat it on a pole, and won the race. That was a 600.
What a story. David Pearson was what, 20, young, in his early 20s?
I'd say about 20, yeah, 20. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Didn't you feel a little uncomfortable putting a raw rookie that...
Yes, I did, really. But then after he had driven, tried the car out for a couple of days, I was satisfied with him. He'd done a fantastic job. He was running very fast to be in the car and not know nothing about it, never being in it before.
So then he drove the car, I guess, after that.
Yeah, we then won 3 main races that year. Won Atlanta and come back to Daytona, won Daytona in July, all in the same year. I think we were the first one to win all of the big races in one year.
61, was that your first Winston Cup ride?
Yeah. Well, I bought an old car to start with from Jack Smith, one of his old dirt cars, and I ran a little bit in 1960 with it, a few races. But in 61 is when I got my break with Ray Fox at Charlotte.
And he called you and said he wanted to drive his Pontiac, which was a top car, right?
Yeah.
At Charlotte.
I understand. Well, he come to Charlotte and didn't have nobody to drive it. And
how could he bring a car up there and not have anyone to drive it?
I don't know how he done that, but I know that Junior had drove his car a time or two, I think, in a few races. In fact, back then they ran, I think, 200-mile races or something before the 600, and that's the way he qualified or something. And he'd already made a deal with Junior to drive it in a 100-mile race. And so Junior drove it in that, and I drove it in the 600.
So Junior qualified the car.
Qualified it, yeah.
And you drove it in the race.
Uh-huh.
And you won the race.
Yeah. Then
You found out it was easy, didn't you?
Well, yeah, I thought it was, especially in that car. Again, we left there, and the next race, I think it was at Daytona Beach, July the 4th, that I ran it. The next race he ran. He didn't run all the races. And luckily, I won that one. Then I went on and we won Atlanta, you know, that year.
Your first year, you won 3 super speedway races.
And at that time, nobody had never done that. Win 3 super speedways in 1 year. So that just really put me right on top, you know.
You want to thank the crew, but you didn't know who the crew was?
That was the first race of Ray Fox. In fact, I'd heard of Ray Fox, but I didn't really know him, you know. And after the race, somebody said something about thanking the crew and named the crew or something, and I said, I don't know them. How can I? I don't even know their names, you know. Didn't know who it was.
Did you change tires that day?
A lot of times.
A lot of times?
A lot of times. We seemed like there ain't no telling how many tires I blowed out that day, and just lucky that I didn't hit anything or hit the wall or anything. But I won the race on 3 tires. You know,
you had a flat when the race was?
Yeah. In fact, I ran the last, 2 or 3 laps.
On a flat tire?
On a flat tire.
How many poles in a row did you win at Charlotte?
13, I believe.
13 poles?
I believe that's about what it was.
There was always something about number 1. You backed off before the bump or over the bump, or?
Everybody always said that, Benny, but about getting into 1, but the tip wasn't really getting into 1. You know, it was 3 and 4 mostly.
Well, how did you convince everybody it was 1?
I didn't. They always thought it was, because the 1 was so rough getting into, you know. They just wasn't doing the talking, not me.
And you just listened?
I just listened.
13.
I know Humpy changed the racetrack one time, and he said he was going to get me, you know.
Yeah.
But he was at the wrong end.
You had the promoter convinced that you wanted to.
I didn't tell him. Everybody else was telling him.
Well, that's David Pearson's sense of humor, and you get another glimpse of it right here. It really made him a prankster on the circuit. He pulled prank after prank on his peers, and some of these hijinks that these men will never forget.
A long time ago, back in the early days when David Pearson and Bobby Isaac were real competitors on a racetrack, in Bristol, Tennessee had just opened, the half-mile racetrack in Bristol. There were a lot of bushes and stuff still growing up in the infield going down the backstretch off into turn 3. Well, back in those days, you just qualified whenever you were ready. You could go out and make a run early in the afternoon or late or whatever. Well, Pearson went out real early. They got a cloud cover, and he went out, and the track was cool, and he thought he'd get the pole. Ran a real good lap, and then a little bit later, Bobby Isaac was out practicing, and David realized he was running quicker than he was and was going to beat him out of the pole. So when Isaac got ready to qualify, Pearson went over in the backstretch out across the infield and hid in those bushes. When they gave Isaac the green flag, he came off turn 2 and down the backstretch, and David stepped out of the bushes and started waving, you know, for whoa, whoa, whoa. So Isaac, you know, obviously comes out of the throttle, slows down, and pulls on pit road and wants to know what's going on. The NASCAR people said nothing. Said, you know, your qualifying run's over. Said, man, you stopped. He said, no. Said, somebody come out on the racetrack and waved me down. And he found out later it was David Pearson, and obviously Pearson got the pole, but Isaac got a tire tool and went looking for David, and David hid in a pickup truck for about 2 hours to keep away from Bobby Isaac that day. That was kind of wild.
He played a lot of awful tricks on me, a lot of them. I can remember one time we had to be in Greenville, South Carolina, and we were in Savannah, Georgia. And we slept late, didn't get started until late, and it was my fault. David was really, he didn't drink or, you know, I mean, he was Mr. Clean back then. And so he asked me if I would drive, and I drove, and we were right outside of Columbia, South Carolina, and we're going over these sand hills, and we're running about 100 miles an hour. And we come over this hill, and there's a highway patrolman sitting on the side of the road. And David looks at it, he says, he's got you now, hasn't he? I've been telling you, which he hadn't. He'd been telling me, mash it, let's go, let's go. And anyway, I didn't wait for the policeman to pull out. I just pulled over and waited on him. And he pulled up, and he came up to the window. And David is sitting over here in the passenger seat, and he's got his feet up on the dash, and he's got a hat pulled down over his eyes. And I roll the window down, And he says, may I see your driver's license? Well, David's first remark is he probably hadn't got one. And I mean, he's not looking, you know, he's got the hat down over his face. And this state trooper, I mean, he's not smiling. And I'm fumbling around trying to get my license out. Finally find it, and he's looking at my license. And David says, boy, I sure am glad you stopped us. I've been trying to get him to slow down for the last 100 miles, and he just keeps, I told him he was gonna get stopped, just like, and I'm sitting there, and then the fine was like $75, and I only had like $25. And I asked David, let me have $50. No, you'll never pay me back. I ain't giving you, lock him up. And this policeman never smiled. I mean, like, if he hadn't finally given me the $40 or $50 to pay the fine, I'd probably still be in jail. He thought it was funny.
And he wanted to borrow some money. I said, oh, you won't pay me back. Take him to jail.
You probably would let him, you probably would have forced him to take him to jail.
I'd like to see him in jail. I really would. I'd have laughed. I'd have went there just to see him put him in jail, you know. I owe him quite a few of them, too.
You do?
Yeah.
He's on the list, too?
He's on the list.
Who's the head of this list, this payback list?
I really don't know who would be the... No, they just quite a few of them. I just write them down as they come to them, you know. So,
Richard Petty, I guess he's on there.
About all racers on there.
About all the racers? Cale?
And a few mechanics.
One of the mechanics who would be high on Pearson's list would have to be Harry Hyde. Like everybody else in the garage area, Hyde is one of the most competitive people you'd ever meet, and even when he was getting beat, he always found a way to get the upper hand.
Were you always a mechanic, or did you ever drive?
I drove for 2 years, Billy. I won a couple races. Sat on the pole, time or two. And I got spun out one time, taking the checkered flag, and I knew if I had a gun, I'd have killed the man. So I quit driving.
First time I ever heard of Harry Hyde was 1964, Huntington, West Virginia. Had a couple of Pontiacs there that day.
Yeah.
All I remember, they said, boy, them's the cheated up car in the world.
Oh, yeah. Well,
you did you did what you had to do to win, right?
The old John Markham, I used to call him. I said, John, can I come to your race at Huntington? Well, I'll let you know. But see, I'd race with him some at Salem and some at Winchester, place he'd run, and he'd always could dock you a lap awful easy. If you wasn't one of his hamburger boys, you was an outsider, you know. And I had him Pontiacs running first and second in Huntington.
Yeah.
I walked up there, he's sitting in the pace car, about 450 laps. I said, John, you gonna let me win this race? And honest to God, this is what he said. If them cars stay running like they're running, I can't do nothing about it. He's telling me, yes, I would if I could. I don't want you to win my race. I'm like, I need your cars, but I don't want you to win my race because my boys need the money. That's just what he takes. Race paid $2,000. So the one won, and then I run second with the other, but for some reason the scoring messed up. He got moved back to fifth.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, so I couldn't holler too bad. I got one in there.
But you did kind of bring some innovations to NASCAR that they hadn't seen before, didn't you?
That's right. Most of them are rules today.
Most of them are rules today.
Yeah, I stopped the radiator up for 2 years and they never know it. And when they caught it, then they allowed everybody to stop. But, you know, couldn't police them. They blew water through them, shoot air through them, and everything else. But
what do you mean you plugged the radiators up?
I used to plug the radiators up with beeswax, so it qualified. And I sat on 18 poles 1 year like that, and they never knew where it was coming from. That was a half a second. That was absolutely a half second. You stop a radiator up and you had a half second.
You're talking about the outside, so the air wouldn't go through the radiator?
That's right, just block it. Now, it packed in there. You couldn't tape the grill like we do today.
Yeah.
And you couldn't put panels in there.
So beeswax, that was your trick?
Yeah, I shoved it back in the cores where the air wouldn't blow through them in. And then I took the fan and I kept taking a little pitch out of it, a little pitch out, a little pitch out. And old Joe Gasway, I never will forget him, he always looked at that fan. He said, that fan don't look like it's got much. I said, well, Joe, I didn't put the pitch in there. I really didn't. I had been taking it out. So he would always look. But the best one I think that Dick Beatty caught me. We had this stick we had to go over. You know, I had to shove his stick on it before the thing went over the roof.
Now they put one on the roof, but they used to have a deal they stuck on the car, and if it hit, you had to raise the car.
That's right.
Okay.
So I bought all the guys, and we had to park at one place. And the wheel had to be exactly there. So I had everybody wearing hard-toed shoes. And when we'd come up there, the guy would just slip his toe under the left front tire, and we would roll it up on there.
On his toe?
On his toe, yeah. And so they'd shove that stick around there, you know, and more right on. But one day Dick come around the corner and said, "Get back out of the way, boy." You know, well, the guy's foot's under the wheel. He can't go now. And he went backwards, you know, but he can't move. And of course, Dick looked, and when he saw that, oh, that was all of that. Hard-toed shoes went out the door then. He made everybody stand back 10 foot in the car after that. And Dick had a guy to catch my radiator, too. Dick made a pretty sharp guy when he was on the job. I'm not saying that Dick, because he gouges me as much as anybody. But he caught my radiator. He had a guy, one inspector, that watched me. After we'd qualify, well, of course, first thing we do is drain the water out of it and back it in and say, we're going to pull our qualifying motor out. Most of the time that was true, but we also changed radiators.
At the same time?
Mm-hmm. So there would go, that trick went out the door. And then, of course, after that, you know, the fuel, the laughing gas, you name it.
Did you ever run any laughing gas?
Tried to one time, got caught.
Did you really?
Yeah. Got caught before I ever got turned on. They knew about it at the race. They got me in Charlotte before I ever even got the car unloaded. That's a truth fire told. Had to take it back up there and take it out. But I was
who told? Somebody
well,
must have
yeah, somebody told him, and then of course I did it because another guy was running against me, and he was beating me, and I didn't like it, so I just put it in to get him, you know. And I'll be John Brown if they didn't catch mine, and they didn't even catch his. And I couldn't tell on him, you know. I just wasn't in the book to tell on somebody.
That's not ethical to.
No, you just go do whatever he's doing, plus a little to beat him, you know. Yeah, you don't. Some guys go tell, but I don't. If I see something, I just fix it for mine and fix it a little bit better, see? And that way it works better. And you don't have to go telling on somebody all the time.
You used to race you had a lot of good times racing against the Wood Brothers back in the day.
Oh, yeah, they were the competition, yeah.
Yeah. And you liked to pick on the Wood Brothers, didn't you?
Hell, yeah. Better than life itself, yeah.
And they take everything so serious, and you took everything kind of tongue-in-cheek.
Well, see, they always was serious, but they always had good race cars and always had good drivers. They was kind of a notch ahead of me all the time, and I was trying to catch them. Told Leonard, he always said, when we retire now, we want to visit one another, and we want to sit in the swing, and we want to tell these stories. I said, well, I will, but every time I tell one, you got to tell me one. I'm not going to do all the talking. Because they got down in the garage area one morning, I walked in there, and that's when things were tight and all the cars were covered up. There's a little peck, you know. Joe Gasway heard it, you know. He said, what was that? I said, I don't know, maybe some rats in here or something, you know. I seen old Leonard's car parked up there. I knowed he was in there. Well, Leonard was up under that cover now, and had pulled the cover back down over him. And he was taking that headlight out, and he was moving it out flush, see? So, you know,
yeah.
So, and so Joe finally heard, and he kept listening, he kept walking. And old Joe had an ear on him, you know. So he got out of Leonard's car, and he just took that cover, and he raised it up like that, and he looked Leonard right in the eye. That was the funniest thing you ever saw in your life. I thought I would die. You ask him about it sometime. Let him tell you about Joe. We'll look at him. His nose wasn't that far from him. And he knew then he'd caught him, you know. So old Leonard just give up. He just uncovered the car and told him, said, whatever you want done to it, I'll do, you know, because Joe done caught him.
Oh, me.
I used to have a great, big, fat boy. He weighed about 300 pounds. And I don't know why he took a liking to me, but I'm the reason that you can't carry a gun in the garage area now. You probably never knew this story, but anyway, when there was a message out, we delivered a message before they had loudspeakers, I guess, I don't know. He always had to come, it was in the afternoon, about 3 or 4 o'clock if he was going to close the garage. He had to throw his arm around me and lay on me. My feet was already hurting, I was already tired, and he's always sweaty. And I just never did like for a man to hug me anyway, you know, just that way. So James Hilton was shooting firecrackers at people. I thought, I got to get this guy off my back somewhere. So I eased this gun out, and I just I pulled it out here, and I just raised it right up by his ear, and I pulled it off through the roof, see? And it was a Magnum, and it bite busted my eardrum. So he said, who's shooting them firecrackers? So that got him off of me. So Leonard was over there watching this. The next morning, here he comes. Leonard said, here comes your boy. Wasn't nobody in the Dover garage but me and Leonard. Here comes your boy, Harry. He said, I said, Leonard, if he comes down here and he puts that big old heavy arm on me this morning, I know he's already sweating. I said, I'm gonna have to blow his feet out under him again. He said, well, let me get over here behind this car before you shoot. So he come down there right straight to me, and when he got to me, he laid that old big arm over me. So I just eased back here. I didn't even take it out of my pocket this time. I just tilted it back a little bit, and I thought I could shoot through my pants, you know, and that way he wouldn't know where it come from. So I pulled her off. Well, he just jumped again. And he said, "There's somebody shooting them damn firecrackers again." I said, "Yeah, and I don't know where he's at, but what I done, I blew the whole ass of my britches out, see? And my gun fell out on the ground. And I thought that Leonard Wood would die over there rolling laughing, you know. And that boy never did know what was happening to him, but somebody else told Gasaway, and I got called to the office about it. So you had to put that gun up.
Harry might have had to leave his Magnum outside the garage area, but there were others who were involved in some shenanigans in those early days of NASCAR racing.
Neil Castles was one of the classics. He was always dependable. He always carried a weapon.
A what?
He carried a weapon, but he was afraid the pay line after the race was going to get stuck up one night. And he was going to be ready. But he had it in his boot one night down at Columbia, and Pete Keller was giving him the move-over flag, I think it was, and coming around, and Neil was a little hot, and he came down there and had the flag out. He took that little hog leg and put a hole through the flag.
He shot at the flag.
Well, I didn't intend to hurt anybody, just do it. But, you know, a lot of things like that there, it was more fun then. And we went down to Fonda, from Fonda, New York, half-mile track from Oxford, Maine. Because I remember that was the night we took the whole field through the cemetery.
Do what?
The race got started, I was driving the pace car, and
Now, what kind of racetrack was this?
half-mile dirt.
Half-mile dirt, and the race starts, you're driving the pace car.
Driving the pace car, I'm sitting there, and suddenly I see the caution come out, and there's a big pile up over in the third turn. I come out in the first turn, get the field. Richard Petty was leading. Go around through the second turn, I look down, and the entire track is blocked going into the third turn. I remember Don Biederman's car, number 94, was in it, because he was parked up on the hill. I could read the number on top of the car coming down the backstretch. And as we get down there, I start looking, and there's no opening on the inside. They're stacked up all the way to the infield. To the outside, there's a little opening. So I said, I'll go out this way. I had headlights. It was a night race. And the lights, of course, lit the track, but not outside. I get out there, and we're in a cemetery. And I'm driving the pace car, trying to pick my way through the tombstones. And suddenly dawned on me, I look back, and all these cars with no lights are trying to follow me through the path and not take a big block of granite through the grill. We did that for 2 laps before they got enough wreckage cleared that we could come back around. But I was Richard Petty and I were talking about that race not too long ago. Said the only time we ever really taken the whole field on a parade lap through a cemetery.
Wow.
And we went to Don Neyman's track, which
Smoky
ended, he
Mountain.
finally ended up at Talladega, but at the time...
Back then it was Maryville, Tennessee.
Maryville, Tennessee. And I went there with a car with a steering wheel this big around and springs set for Talladega. And they had great tires at that time, luckily. And I took off and I set a blistering pace. I was like a lap ahead of everybody, and I was just, I mean, I didn't have a style, I just had a wide open deal. If I won, if the car finished, I won. So I was going around there and I was having a big time, and I was thinking to myself, well, this is the greatest night of my life. And about that time, the right front tire went boom, and into the wall I went. And it just stuck like glue. Well, it broke, I don't know how many ribs you got on the right-hand side. I guess I had 2 hanging off, but, you know, the rest of them were broke. And it really hurt bad. And I was into the wall. I mean, the car looked like a motorcycle sitting up against the wall. And they come up there, and this little guy brought I don't know what kind of thing Don Neiman had out there, but the ambulance was like well, I don't think Pontiac's made a thing since 1947, so that tells you something about what kind of... And this ambulance comes running up there, and a guy jumps out, looked like Barney Fife. He grabbed his britches and jerked him up. No, you just stay calm. And I said, calm? Get me out of this damn thing. So they started unlacing me and pulling me by the shoulders, and of course I got broken ribs and what else. I don't know what was broke in that deal. There was a whole bunch of stuff. And they put me in the ambulance way up on the bank, and they shoved me in there, and they just tapped the door shut. Didn't shut it. Didn't lock the casters on the
gurney.
Whatever that thing was. And they had me like I was going crazy. They had me locked down on my legs, my arms, and all the way up my chest. And this little guy got in there, and I went, oh, like that, and he hit the throttle. When he did, it shot me out the back of the damn ambulance, and down the racetrack I went sliding. And when it got to the dirt, it turned end over end with me on it. And he, you know, he finally got me calmed down a little bit. I was trying to get off the stretcher. We go down towards town, and I heard one of them say, where's the hospital at? Well, I could go on and on. There were so many things happened that evening, going to the... But anyhow, that was... I realized we wasn't going to win a championship that year, because I don't believe I had enough body to give to those. Those were early days of racing, though, and Don Neiman gets a big kick out of that when we talk about it and all, but it was crazy. I mean, it just kept on and on. You know, like when I come out of the hospital and been x-rayed and taped and done all that.
And who drove back to the speedway?
Well, we went out there, and I got up in the ambulance. I said, drive me back up the racetrack. They're waiting on me. And they started to crank it up, and the battery was dead.
Since the automobile was invented, testing has always played a major role in development of new and improved models. And some of the early test facilities, well, they were a little basic, more daring than technical. But for race cars in the 70s, the testing sessions were becoming more precise, more complicated. Buddy Baker became the first driver to break the 200-mile-an-hour barrier on a closed circuit. Quite an achievement?
Yeah, I want to talk about that because, you know, it's always the funniest thing. I was the first man that ever run 200 miles an hour on a closed course circuit. Let me tell you what significance it has. I was lucky. I went down there to do a transmission test for Chrysler Corporation. I come out of the pits and I run one lap and I run 199.9. And they said, wait a minute, nobody's ever run 200 miles an hour. I come out of the pits and the first lap around was 199.9. So we called up NASCAR and got all the people over there. It was not a planned deal or anything. It was just that I was lucky enough to be there when the time come to do this. And the car was capable of running probably 210 miles an hour. Let's face it, once you get over 170 miles an hour, you go by the stopwatch, which a driver does not have. And I run 200.447. The whole deal was, I said, let's lower the front end and do this and that, and we can run, you know, 210. That'd really be, they said, no point. Somebody run 100, somebody run 150, somebody run 200. You were the first 200. It's over with. That was the end of the test.
What would a race car driver in the 60s, how would he react to situations?
Well, you were one of them. But I guess you guys were a little overreactive sometimes, because I had an incident down here at Daytona that taught me a good lesson. I was working for Firestone then, and it was in November, and we were doing testing. I guess we'd run about 2,000 miles, and it was the day before Thanksgiving. And you know, everybody wanted to get it over with and get back to North Carolina for see our families Thanksgiving. Well, Buddy Baker was driving Ray Fox's car at the time, and it was, you know, Buddy had been so many thousand miles of testing, it gets boring after a while, and then he'd come in and we'd start pushing him because we had a lot of different tires to test, and we had 4 more sets we had to do before we called over, because we sure didn't want to do it on Thanksgiving Day, but we were going to have to. So Buddy starts getting inconsistent about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. He's running one lap 190, the next lap 194, the next lap 188. And so we pulled him in, and I said, Buddy, what is wrong with you? I said, you completely, is something wrong with a car? Of course, Ray Fox knew there was nothing wrong with the car, and Buddy said, well, I cannot see coming out of the 4th turn. I got a blind spot, and he says, it just makes me feel uncomfortable, and I'm backing out of it. I said, that son can't. What's what they make tape for? We'll put tape across the windshield. He was really agitated at me. So he goes back again and does the same thing. We flag him in again. He comes in, and he didn't say anything this time. I said, okay, buddy, we just got to get 10 more laps in. He said, I'm still having a problem with the sun. He said, but I noticed there's a bolt laying on the backstretch, a big bolt, a big body bolt. It's okay. So, you know, you jump in the car and you go to the backstretch, pick the bolt up, he brings you back around, you jump out of the car and he starts running again. I'm in the car, no seatbelt on. He takes off.
In the race car?
In the race car, and to look for the bolt. But he wasn't going at the speed you look for a bolt at. He was going wide open down the pit road. He hits the first turn wide open, and I'm sitting there. I am completely discombobulated. We go down the back stretch as fast as the car would run. No bolt on the back stretch. I wasn't looking at the back stretch. I was looking at it to figure out whether I was going to stay alive in this race car or not. We get in the 4th turn, and that light hits me, and he slaps me and puts his hand back on the steering wheel because he was really had everything taped up. So we go back again. I said, pull the thing in. And he can't hear anything, you know. So we go back again. And then this time we got our speed up, right? So we come back across the line. We don't come in. We come back, and I'm dying. I am telling you, I know what you guys go through now. I never thought this 2.5-mile track was so short as I was in that car. So we come back down the front stretch, 3 laps, full tilt, and I see the board being held up, 189 plus. And I was trying to find the kill switch. I wasn't going to do this anymore. But that 4th turn, you could not see anything. It was crazy to see in the world. We pulled in. Buddy Baker looked at me with one of those grins like that, and then he started laughing, and I had gone to the bathroom in my pants.
Did you really?
I really did. It was the scariest thing I have ever seen. I mean, and I've been in some tough situations.
Was the test over?
The test was officially over.
Well, Wheeler called a halt to that testing session and headed to the laundromat. Meanwhile, one man who has never had any problems with speed is Richard Petty. From the day he went to his very first race with his dad, Lee, who would have ever thought that this lanky young kid from the Randleman Level Cross area in North Carolina would become racing's biggest winner?
First time I ever went to a race was up here right this side of Greensboro. I must have been about 7, 8 years old. And they had a little old 30-mile dirt, and they was running sprint cars or midgets or something. And they didn't have a grandstand. We sat in a tree. I remember Daddy took me and set me up on a limb, and I watched the race. That's the first race I ever remember going to. We went to Daytona in 48, 47, or 48, I guess, and went down there and watched a modified race or whatever they had on the beach. That was before Daddy started running. That's the first race of a NASCAR race that I remember going to. Then the first Winston Cup race was in Charlotte, North Carolina in 1959, and I remember going to that. We drove down there in a
1959 or
49? 49.
Yeah.
Yeah, keep me straight on these
Yeah.
years. And Daddy and them had found out they was going to have a race and they was going to run stock cars. And there was a boy in Greensboro had a 47 Buick and four-door, great big Buick deal. And it just fly on the highway, so they talked him into letting them borrow it, my daddy and my uncle. And they was going to take it to Charlotte and race it. We drove it to Charlotte, went out on Wilkerson Boulevard, that's where the racetrack was at. Stopped at a service station, they pulled it in on the ramp, jacked it up, changed the oil in it, cleaned it all up, got ready, went out and drove it to the racetrack. I mean, we drove it to Charlotte, then they drove it out to the racetrack, and they ran the race and ran about 2/3 of the race and broke a rear sway bar and turned the thing over and tore all the doors off of it and the top and all that. They went back the next day with a flatbed truck and got it. But that was the first Winston Cup race I went.
Well, what did they tell this poor man that owned the car?
They told him his car had a little problem. I don't know really how they ever got it by him, but that was the first car. Then the next deal, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks after that, they was going to have another Grand Nationals, what they call it at that time, Grand National race. So they said, you know, the Buick's fast and it's big, but we've got to run 100 miles on these old rough tracks. So he said, best thing to do is get the lightest car we can. So he went out and bought a 49 Plymouth Coupe. And I guess it's $1,100 or something is how much it cost him. But anyhow, and that's how he got in the Plymouth business or in the racing business.
When did you figure out that you wanted to drive a car? Was this always in the back of your mind, or?
I've been hanging around races with Daddy, I guess, ever since I was 10, 11 years old. And, you know, that's the first time when people see you and they ask you, just like you did Kyle, they see him and say, when you going to start driving? You know, you're 12 years old and 14 years old or 16 years old. They say, okay, when you going to start driving? I really didn't think that much about it till probably I got out of high school, when I was 17, I guess, when I got out of high school. And I never really thought that much about it. But then when I got to be 18, I said, you know, if I've been working on these cars all this time, I want to drive one of them. And, you know, I think most everybody knows the story. I just said, Daddy, okay, I'm ready. I want to drive a car. He said, you're not but 18, and I'm not going to let you run till you're 21. Get back over and go to work on that car. I'm still driving. So I went back to work on the car, and I don't know that I really ever had a burning desire that I just had to do it. It was always in my mind I wanted to do it. And, you know, when I got to be 21, you know, I said, okay, now I'm 21 years old. I want to start driving a car. And he said, okay, fix that one up over there. And me and Dale and Red Miler took a convertible to Columbia. And I'd never been around a racetrack at any speed. I drove them around, warmed them up. But first time I'd ever put a helmet on and a seat belt and went out and tried to run. And I went out and I qualified 13th, I think, in the race. And when the race was over, I finished 6th. Of course, a bunch of them fell out and all this stuff, but still yet we finished 6th in the race. And I guess that one particular race made my mind up that, you know, this was really what I wanted to do. I said, man, if I can do that good and never run, you know what I mean, I can really go. Of course, then I run for about 6 months and didn't finish the race because I was one stuck in the wall from then on. But, you know, then it started coming to you that realized that it wasn't that easy. You was going to have to do a little work at it, and it just come a little over time.
In the early 70s, you got late 60s was Richard Petty, and early 70s was Richard. Then in 73 or sometime, Pearson started driving for the Wood Brothers, and all of a sudden, for 3 or 4 years, it was Petty and Pearson. What were those years like racing with David?
Well, you know, it's always been somebody. You know, just to back up a little bit, when I first started running, it was Petty and Lorenzen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
All right. Then here comes David along, and he gets everything hot, and it's you know, then I start racing with him. The deal was that the Woods boys always had a very, very competitive car, but they just never got it together because they never run all the races. And you know what I mean? And they concentrated mostly on the big races, and that was one of David's expertise. Of course, he was just as good on the short track as anybody, but he liked the big tracks too. So they had a good combination, and when they did that, then that gave me a lot more competition than what I'd really want to have. But you know, you go back through the records, there's nobody run first and second more than David Pearson and myself. Either he runs first and I run second, or I run first and he runs second. I think he's up 1 or 2 on me. But anyhow, you know, and there's nobody in the whole history of NASCAR and all the years they've run that's run that many first and seconds. So we were the show.
They were the show, all right. Event after event, it was one or the other who always won. Those same 2 drivers, Richard Petty and David Pearson, were involved in what many people feel might be the most famous finish in NASCAR racing history, the 1976 Daytona 500. Those 2 men tangled in the final turn of the final lap.
Was that the most exciting finish that you've ever been involved in?
Probably was, you know. If Richard hadn't come up, he had to race 1.
Yeah.
You know, no doubt about it. He had me beat bad that day. And there's nothing I could do about it because I was doing all I could just to hang on, drafting, you know. And of course, when I got in front, he let me get in front. You know, he could have passed me anytime he wanted to, but he just wanted to wait to that last lap to make sure that I didn't draft back by him. And of course, I fiddled around and kept easing up, you know, waiting and trying to get him to go around. And
when you say easing up, you mean backing off the gas?
Yeah. And just getting a little slower and slower, you know, and finally he went around, you know. And I drafted by him down the backstretch, and just quick as I went into 3, he just went right back under me and went on, you know. But if he'd have stayed low, he had to race 1.
Maybe you couldn't hold it down low.
I never did feel that way. I felt like he come up to get in front of me to keep me from getting back by and drafting him, you know, back to the start and finish line. You know, back then you could draft anybody coming off 4 and beat them to start and finish line back then, you know, because we was running slower. And I think that's what he done, but he didn't know how bad he had me beat that day.
He just didn't
realize it.
Well, after as well as you'd been running for the last 3 or 4 years, I guess it was.
But that day, I don't know what it was. We just couldn't. Just didn't seem like we was going, you know, or like we wasn't geared right or something. I don't know what it was.
How'd you keep the car running, or did the engine die?
No, it never did that. I kept it running.
Pushed the clutch in and just kept that thing running.
Mm-hmm. And I went to hollering, "Where's Richard? Where's Richard?" Because I couldn't see him for the smoke and stuff, you know.
Had they told you just got to beat him to the line, right?
Yeah, they said he was sitting there. You know, he didn't make it to start and finish line.
So then when you started through the grass, you saw him sitting there?
Mm-hmm. When I turned around, I was actually backed. My back was to him. You know, I was facing
the fourth
garage area.
The garage area, yeah.
And that's when Joe Frazon come down and went across the front of it. And then I just made a U-turn and come back, and then I could see him.
Man, oh man.
Now, because there was national broadcast coverage of that race, the finish generated enormous interest in stock car racing. But there had been a lot of lessons learned by a lot of people in the years that led to that spectacular 1976 Daytona 500 finish. The first Daytona 500 back in 1959 had no caution flags, but it did take 3 days to declare the winner.
And we found out during running that event that just how much about motorsports we did not know. It was a whole new ball game, and so we had to grow up in that. That's one. You know, there's been a number of events that I guess some of the ones that stand out are ones where we had some controversy at the end on who won the race. The first Daytona race took 2 or 3 days because of the photo finish. We learned we needed a camera on the tracks where you can draft that, and that was the beginning of a photo finish camera.
First super speedway race I ran was Daytona when they opened the new racetrack, but we was running convertibles. They had a 59 Oldsmobile, and I had a 57 Oldsmobile convertible. And, you know, we ran the first race there, was the convertible race, and we qualified I think I qualified 129 mile an hour. And I think we ran third in a 100-mile race or something. And then the hard tops and stuff was all running 140, 40, I think it qualified 143 was the fastest. And so they started the hard tops on, I think, the inside row, and us on the outside row, or vice versa. And they throwed the flag, and you know, I started 6th or 8th or something in the race. Well, one of those cars come by, and I just jumped in there behind him, caught that draft. Well, my car was set up to run 130 mile an hour. All of a sudden, the motor was trying to run 140. And the RPMs went out of sight, and so did the rods and the pistons and everything else out of that thing. So we wasn't really set up for a drafting situation. And
you didn't know what drafting was back then, did you?
Well, we was learning. In other words, first race we found out something, but we didn't really know what was going on. We just knew it was happening and was trying to take advantage of it. But anyhow, then I fell out of the race naturally, and I didn't remember it 7, 8 laps. And then I come down to the pits, and the pits then was really organized. I mean, if you'll see any of the pictures and stuff, they run the whole first 500 miles and never had any cautions. Had a bunch of wrecks, but no cautions, because they'd crash and get off the track. They just kept running, and everything was stopped under green and the whole deal. And you run and you stop, and you can see. I've seen films and stuff, and you see the driver. You change tires, or most time put in gas. But down there they was having a little tire trouble, so we had to change tires, and you'd see the driver sit in there, and you'd say, okay, driver, go, no radio communication stuff, and you can see him look around like this, see if there's anybody coming down pit road before he'd pull out.
When'd you go on the lake in Daytona?
No, that was Tommy Irwin. Yeah, that was Tommy Irwin. See, when I saw Tommy go in the lake, and,
I'm talking about Lake Lloyd on the back.
Oh, yeah, on the great backstretch. See, in them days, the T-Bird had the windows closed in our days, so he went under. And he didn't come up for a long time. And we're trying to find out what happened. And he finally told us after he came up. The crank of the window came off. This is the truth. The crank of the window came off, and he was trying to get out of the car and couldn't get out because he couldn't find the handle. So then he unstrapped his belts and went on the floor, and he found the handle, and he finally put it back on and rolled it down, and he come out of the car. This is the honest of God's truth.
Was there water in the car?
Oh, it was coming. It was coming, but he couldn't find the crank handle. And he finally got it. So I saw that, and me knowing that I can't swim, I went and bought a life jacket and an aqua lung, and I wore it the whole race. I did, because I'm definitely scared of water.
You didn't want to go in that lake?
Oh, no.
Pistone, by the way, was wearing his life jacket. As for other drivers, well, there have been a lot of embarrassing moments, almost too many to share, but we do have a few for you.
It's hard to, it's really hard to tell. I guess one of the most embarrassing things that ever happened to me is, was in, 84 when Richard won the 200th at Daytona, the Firecracker 400. I had Richard set up exactly where I wanted him to win the race. I was right on his bumper, car was running good, handling good, and I just had him set just where I wanted him to win the race. And with 2 laps left, the caution came out. Well, that caught me a lap early, and I was out of position. I was out of where I wanted to be. But I still made my run at him and got by him, but I didn't have a good enough run at him to stay by him. So he beat me back to the start-finish line, knowing that the race was going to be over. The race wasn't going to start back. That whoever got back to start-finish line was going to win this race. Well, he caught me a little bit out of position, and he beat me about a foot back to the start-finish line. Well, knowing in my head that the race was over, that was it. Forgetting that there was one more lap to go, came back round to for the last lap. I pulled in the pits. Cost me a lot of money and a lot of position, but I just had in my mind that the race is over when we get back to the start-finish line. Didn't think it was, it was over as far as winning was concerned, but it wasn't over as far as laps was concerned. So it just, my brain flew out of gear, and it cost me something. That was one of the most embarrassing things I ever did.
What's the strangest thing that ever happened to you in a race car? You remember up there when Darrell made a swipe at you after the checkered flag dropped? What'd you say when you saw him making a dive before he going down in turn 1?
Well, Darrell and I battled throughout the race, really, and it came down to a last lap situation, and going down the backstretch for the checkered flag. Darrell tried to get by me, and we bumped a little bit, but he was trying to move me up out of the groove a little bit, and I didn't move. I stayed right there and went on and just beat him out some, And but Darrell was hot, and we got the checkered flag, and went on down past the checker flag, went to the first turn. Darrell just made a big run at me. I mean a run at me. He was going to cream me. But I saw him coming. I slammed on brakes, and he went by and spun out in the infield and got bogged down in the mud and couldn't get out. I just sat there and laughed. I'm sure he wasn't laughing, but he made a shot at me, but he ended up bogged down in the mud.
What's the strangest thing that ever happened to you in the pits?
I think the most confused that I've ever been when Strader backed that car in at Talladega so perfect.
What do you mean backed it?
Well, he was coming down pit road and he locked his brakes up and he parked it backwards, just as perfect as you could.
In his pit?
Exactly where we need to be. Only he was just 180 degrees out.
The back end was heading out instead of front.
That's the truth, and my God, you know them guys went crazy. There is guys with tires going to the wrong side, guys breaking wheels loose, a jack man's the wrong place. The man don't want to clean the back glass or the windshield. See, they're programmed, you know, and they're fixed. And it's like I told, you know, they finally moved this pit back one notch because they got it when you cross the line your pit, you can jump. These guys are so programmed to jump, they'll jump right in front of that car if he's under control or he ain't. And so that's probably as confused as I've ever been when he parked that car backwards. And it was most of the time they're crooked, or they're too far down, or they didn't make it. But this guy parked so perfect until it was just, it's unbelievable. You never could do it again.
That's the first car that Goodyear bought, you know, in the tire testing. They never bought a car in their life. But that was the agreement. You know, if the car got wrecked, they would pay for it. And they bought the Pontiac for me. So I come out, we made the race, and in them days, if you can remember, the gas pedal was on a pin, the gas pedals. You know, regular stock gas pedal. And the gas pedal come off. And as short as I am, I couldn't reach it, see? And I'm trying to figure out what am I gonna do here. So I unstrapped my belts, I was coming down the straightaway over here, and Norris for real yells over the microphone, there's a car loose, there's a car loose. You know, they didn't know I was on the floor looking for my gas pedal. See the car, and the car's going down the straightaway, and they all thought the driver, you know, that I was dead or something, you know. Then I finally found the gas pedal, I stuck it back on, and I went racing, you know. Put my belts back on.
They thought the driver jumped in the car.
They'd see the car go down the straightaway with no driver in it.
Pistone, of course, has a lot of stories to tell about others, but Lynn Kukler, who is NASCAR's director of competition, has a couple of stories to tell about Tom also.
He was on the Grand American Tour with us up in the East, and all of us were getting ready. Most of us stayed at the same hotel, and Tom was leaving, and all of a sudden he has his two boys along, and he's screaming at them. And later on, and somebody else heard him, and they told me what I went over to Tom. I said, what was the big problem? He said, oh, they got caught taking the sheets out of the room and putting them in the truck. And he said, I told them any number of times, if you're taking sheets, take it from somebody else's room, not ours.
Taking sheets from motel rooms was not the only thing that some teams tried to get away with. There have been other days in the past when NASCAR has used restrictor plates to slow down the race cars, and Lynn Kukler remembers how one team tried to get around that restrictor plate.
Well, one of the crews at one time had a restrictor in it. When you looked in it, you saw it. But when they pressed the button under the dash, why, the spring pulled it back, and you could race with it until you got ready to come in at the end, and then you got it, if you punched the button again and the spring pulled it back in, so when it was inspected afterwards, why, it still had the appearance of a restrictor.
Harry Hyde and Benny Parsons rehashed some of their days together.
Back in 1987, when I was driving your car, I crashed at Darlington and tore the car all to pieces and came in and trying to get the points. It was in the April race, so we wanted to stay on the racetrack and get as many points as we could. So you fixed the car, you and the crew fixed the car, and I went back out, and about 10 or 15 laps later, the caution flag came out. And I said, Harry, you want me to pit? What'd you tell me?
I said, no, we don't want you in here. We're having ice cream. We can't fool with you. If you want to come in for an ice cream, we'll buy you one. We got the thing set right there behind the pit, and we all got us ice cream. And everybody's got about a bite out of it when you called in. And, of course, I didn't want you in anyway because what we're running about 140 miles an hour, and we're 10, 12 miles off the pace now because you ain't got no hood, no fenders, your wheels are knocked out of line. We're just trying to make points. And I think you said, well, I don't think that, I believe NASCAR would frown on that if I come in and got me an ice cream. I said, well, we'll buy you one when the race is over, then you can have ice cream with it, but we can't handle you now. Next time, you said, what about it? Said, are you ready for it? I said, yeah, we're ready for it now, man, you come on in. But you took that in stride, you know, really, everybody was hot and skinned up, and there's that ice cream wagon. Well, they like to eat that thing up. We walked back up there, and I looked around, everybody's got ice cream, so I got me one. And when you come on the radio, that just run out. I mean, you know.
And of course, Pistone has a couple of more stories for us.
Shenanigans? No, Ty and Lynn was the guy who pulled shenanigans. Like at Macon, Georgia, before the race starts, he handcuffed me to the fence.
I mean, you're serious?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. A lot of people remember that. He absolutely handcuffed me to the fence, and I couldn't get in the car. And finally, some fan came over, had a key, and unlocked me. So like an idiot, I start running from my car and put my helmet on. My God, I got full of water. Ty and Lynn filled my helmet up with water. He filled it. See? Oh, yeah. Then one race at Daytona. I don't know if you remember this now. Joe Weatherly stole all the keys. So we used to have keys in our cars in them days.
He stole all
the keys. All the keys. Joe.
You're kidding.
All the keys. And nobody could start their cars. He was the only one.
When they said, Joe, and start your engines, nobody could start.
They couldn't find the keys because Joe had them all.
Well, how did you get them sorted out once he got them all?
Well, in our day, France liked that kind of stuff, Bill France Sr., so you know, it was very enjoyable. You know,
Today they
quite
pay
funny.
for that.
Oh, yeah.
But
Today, you can't touch a car today. You know, all these big secrets they got. You know, and then at another race, he stole all the gas caps, Joe Weatherly. Took all the gas caps off, you know. Oh, yeah, it was fantastic. It was.
Now in the creativity department, Smokey Yunick says it all. He might be the only guy we know of who was able to combine basketball with the sport of auto racing.
After trying everything he could to get an agreement to police the tanks and saw it was a hopeless case, he stuck a basketball in a big gas tank. When he went to get it, let the air out of it, and he went down or filled it up with air, and then had the tank filled up and held 22 gallons, and after, when the race started, they let the air out of the basketball and it held 26. That was about as good as I've seen.
Did you get away with the...
Huh?
How come did somebody tell on you, or did...
No, the tank and the basketball still here.
We call them legends now, those pioneers who helped start the sport of NASCAR Winston Cup racing and help it evolve to where it is today. Legends they may be to us, but to Buddy Baker, they're even more than that.
I think the real heroes in our sport are the people that ran 120 miles an hour or 130 miles an hour on stock tires, no spoilers, you know, no wonderful steering that we have now in developed race cars, no aerodynamics. The heroes were Fireball Roberts, Buck Baker, Junior Johnson. My God, those guys went 500 miles on a milk crate and a prayer. Those are the heroes, not us. We do our job. We do what we're supposed to do. They pay us to win, we win.
Their names roll right off the tongue. Fireball, Little Joe, Tiny, Tiger Tom, Bud and Little Bud, Smokey, Big Bill, and Junior. They were just some of the men who, for their own reasons, came to NASCAR racing and helped it grow, letting their own career accomplishments add luster to the great sport that we now know as Winston Cup racing. Some of their deeds and, yes, some of their antics will be forgotten with time, and that really is a shame because these men are the living history of the growth of Winston Cup racing. Their stories will continue, but for now, the legends have spoken.
They said, I've got all kinds of things on the gym. I've done everything. I slipped his car in reverse one time at a red light. You know, and then told him the guy next to him was going to beat him, you know. I've pulled up. Anything you can think of on an old gym, I pulled it.
Did he go backwards?
Yeah.
Did he hit that car behind him?
Wham! He went back. You know?
I'll tell you a story is true from that aspect. In 1953, I believe it was, me and a friend of mine took a car that I was hauling booze with and made it into a race car and went to Darlington and won the, I forget what it was. It was like a Rebel 200 or something at that particular time. It was a modified race, and we just took it right off the street and painted it and basically put some roll bars and stuff in it and went to Darlington and won the race.
Those daring young speed merchants pushed them, merchants, take 3.
You know, you was involved in probably the most famous crash in all of racing. When you went over the wall at Darlington, they still show that.
Yeah, that was quite a ride, especially back in those days, you know. Might have been the first car that ever completely cleared the fence anywhere without even touching the fence. But, yeah, that was in 1965, driving for Banjo Matthews, and car got completely airborne. Going into turn 1, went over the top of Sam McQuaig's car, over the top of the guardrail, never touched it, and right on out into the parking lot. Quite a ride.
Yeah, in Darlington. Going down in turn 1, I'll never forget that. You got under me going in the corner, and I said, well, I'm going to race old David down the corner. And we touched and hit the wall, crashed, and I'll never forget that thing sliding across the wall, and I heard David yell.
Oh, man, I've yelled quite a few things.
That was just part of the way a racer was then, you know. He'd go out and chase women, get drunk all night long, and then swear in the morning, I ain't never going to do that again.
Still in the 60s, the majority of the drivers were from the heartland of the South, the Carolinas, Virginia, Georgia, and of course, Alabama. One of the best during that time.
I can tell you a lot of stuff on him if you can get that thing off.